In every national park, boundary markers define where protected wilderness begins and ends. They're survey monuments, metal posts, concrete cairns, brass plaques, installed by professional surveyors using GPS coordinates and legal land descriptions. They mark the official boundary between federal land and everything beyond it. In Olympic National Park, the boundary markers are standardized. Steel posts, 6 feet tall, painted white with black lettering showing the boundary line designation and installation date. Except for the blue ones. There are 127 blue boundary markers scattered throughout Olympics backcountry. They're identical to the official white markers, same dimensions, same mounting, same weathering patterns, suggesting decades of installation. But they're painted blue, and they mark boundaries that don't exist. Blue marker 47 sits 3 miles inside the official park boundary. Blue marker 82 marks a boundary between 2 sections of wilderness that are both federally protected. Blue marker 103 sits at the exact geographic center of the park, 7 miles from any actual boundary. When rangers asked the Park Service about the blue markers in 2006, they were told, "Do not remove them. Do not discuss their purpose. Do not investigate their origins." 18 years later, rangers still don't know what boundaries the blue markers are defining, or what happens if you cross them. In March 2006, Olympic National Park contracted a comprehensive boundary survey. The park's official boundaries hadn't been verified since 1972, and Regional Command wanted updated GPS coordinates for all boundary monuments. Surveyor Michael Chen and his team spent 3 months hiking Olympics perimeter, documenting every boundary marker. Standard procedure: photograph the marker, record GPS coordinates, verify against legal land descriptions, note condition and any discrepancies. Chen's team documented 847 official boundary markers, all accounted for, all properly positioned, all painted white with black lettering. They also documented 127 markers that shouldn't exist. Chen's field report from May 2006 encountered boundary marker 3.2 miles inside park boundary, marker identical to official survey monuments, steel post, 6 feet tall, proper mounting. But painted blue. Lettering reads, Boundary 47 1973. No corresponding marker in official survey records. GPS coordinates: 47.8234 degrees north, 123.6721 degrees west. Over the next 6 weeks, Chen's team found 126 more blue markers, all identical to official monuments except for color. All marked with sequential numbers and installation dates between 1971 and 1975. All positioned inside the park boundary, some by a few hundred yards, others by several miles. None appeared in any Park Service records. Chen submitted his findings to Regional Command with a simple question: what are the blue markers? Should they be included in the official boundary survey? The response came 3 weeks later. Blue markers are not part of official park boundary. Do not include in survey documentation. Do not remove. Report locations to headquarters only. Do not discuss with unauthorized personnel. Chen's team completed the survey and filed their report. The 847 official boundary markers were documented. The 127 blue markers were listed in a separate appendix marked Anomalous Survey Monuments, Status Unclear. Nobody explained what boundaries the blue markers were defining. The first investigation. Ranger David Ortega had worked Olympic for 8 years when Chen's survey results circulated through the ranger station. He'd seen blue markers before during backcountry patrols, but assumed they were old decommissioned monuments or historical survey points. The idea that 127 unauthorized boundary markers had been installed throughout the park and that Regional Command knew about them but refused to explain them bothered him. In July 2006, Ortega requested permission to document the blue markers, positions, and determine their purpose. Permission was denied. He was told the markers were under review by headquarters and that field investigation was not necessary at this time. So Ortega documented them anyway, off the books, during regular patrols. Over 6 months, he photographed 43 blue markers and recorded their GPS coordinates. He plotted them on a topographic map to see if they formed a pattern. They did. The blue markers formed a boundary, not around the park's perimeter, but inside it. They enclosed an irregular polygon roughly 23 miles across at its widest point, encompassing approximately 140 square miles of wilderness in the park's interior. Ortega's notes from December 2006, blue markers appear to define an internal boundary zone within Olympic National Park. Zone includes sections of the Hoh River Valley, parts of the Olympic Mountains, and portions of the western rainforest. All terrain inside the blue boundary is federally protected wilderness. No difference in land designation between inside and outside the blue markers. Question: what is the blue boundary separating if both sides are national park land? He submitted his findings to his supervisor, Ranger Marcus Webb. Webb had seen the blue markers, too. He'd been told the same thing Ortega had: don't investigate, don't discuss. But Ortega's map changed things. If the blue markers formed a coherent boundary, that suggested intentional installation. Someone had surveyed an internal zone within Olympic and marked it with 127 unauthorized monuments. Why? Webb brought the question to Regional Command in January 2007. He included Ortega's map, photographs of 43 blue markers, and a formal request for explanation. What is the purpose of the blue boundary markers? Who installed them? What is being demarcated? The response took 4 weeks. When it came, it was brief. Blue boundary markers are survey monuments installed during 1971 to 1975 park expansion planning. They are not part of current park boundary and do not designate restricted areas. Rangers are instructed not to remove blue markers and not to discuss their purpose with park visitors. No further investigation necessary. This matter is considered resolved. The response didn't answer any of Webb's questions. Park expansion planning in the 1970s wouldn't explain why markers were placed inside the existing boundary. And if they didn't designate restricted areas, why couldn't rangers discuss them? Webb filed the response and instructed Ortega to drop the investigation. But Ortega kept the map, and over the next 3 years he kept adding to it every time he encountered a blue marker during patrols. By 2009, he'd documented 89 of the 127 blue markers. The boundary they formed was precise, deliberate, and completely unexplained. Field note: how boundary markers work. National park boundaries are legal designations defined by congressional legislation and presidential proclamations. The boundaries are described using surveyors' metes and bounds, precise measurements from known reference points using compass bearings and distances. To make these legal descriptions physically visible on the ground, surveyors install boundary monuments, permanent markers placed at key points along the boundary line. These monuments serve as reference points for future surveys and help prevent encroachment onto federal land. Official boundary markers in national parks are standardized. In Olympic National Park, they consist of steel posts, 6 feet tall, 4 inches in diameter, painted white with weather-resistant paint, black lettering showing Olympic National Park boundary and a unique marker number, installation date and surveyor's mark, concrete foundation anchoring the post. The markers are installed by professional surveyors working under contract with the National Park Service. Each marker's position is calculated using GPS and verified against legal land descriptions. The markers are then recorded in official survey documents maintained by the Park Service. Unauthorized installation of boundary markers on federal land is illegal. Only authorized surveyors working under Park Service contract can install boundary monuments. The blue markers in Olympic are identical to official boundary markers in every way except color. They have the same dimensions, the same mounting system, the same weathering patterns, suggesting 30-plus years of exposure. They have sequential numbering, blue marker 1 through blue marker 127, and installation dates between 1971 and 1975. But they don't appear in any official survey records. They weren't installed by any documented Park Service contract. And they mark a boundary that has no legal designation. Someone surveyed an internal zone within Olympic National Park, calculated 127 precise positions, and installed permanent boundary monuments marking that zone. The installation would have required significant resources: steel posts, concrete, surveying equipment, helicopter transport to remote locations. This wasn't amateur work. It was professional surveying, expensive, precise, deliberate. But there's no record of who did it or why. And when rangers ask, they're told not to investigate. The hiker reports. In August 2010, a hiker named Sarah Mills filed a report at the HOH Rainforest Ranger Station. She'd been backpacking the Hoh River Trail and had crossed what she described as a blue boundary marker in the middle of nowhere. "I thought it was strange," Mills told Ranger Elena Vasquez. "It looked like a park boundary post, but it was 3 or 4 miles inside the park. I checked my map, and there's no boundary there. What was it marking?" Vasquez gave the standard response rangers had been instructed to use. Some markers are historical survey points that are no longer active. They're left in place for reference. But Mills had taken photographs. She showed Vasquez her phone, blue marker 62, clearly visible in a clearing beside the Hoh River Trail. The marker's GPS coordinates from the photo metadata placed it 4.2 miles inside the official park boundary. After Mills left, Vasquez added the report to a growing file. Over the past 2 years, 17 hikers had asked about blue markers. All had encountered them deep inside the park. All had assumed they marked some kind of boundary and were confused about what that boundary might be. Rangers were instructed to deflect the questions: historical survey points, old decommissioned markers, reference monuments for trail maintenance. None of those explanations were true, but rangers weren't authorized to say what the markers actually were, because nobody knew. The crossing incident. In June 2012, Ranger Thomas Chen was on patrol in the Elwha River Valley when he encountered blue marker 34. He'd seen it before on previous patrols, a steel post marking what appeared to be a boundary crossing on the Elwha River Trail. Chen was documenting the marker's condition when he heard voices approaching from the north. 2 hikers emerged from the forest, looking disoriented. "Are we still in the park?" one of them asked. "We've been hiking for 3 hours and we keep seeing boundary markers." Chen checked his GPS. They were 5.8 miles inside Olympic National Park. "You're well inside the park boundary," he said. "What markers are you seeing?" The hikers showed him photos on their phones. Blue markers. They'd encountered 6 of them over the past 3 hours, all positioned along the trail as if marking a perimeter. "We thought we'd accidentally crossed out of the park," the other hiker said, "but our GPS says we're still inside. What are those markers for?" Chen gave the standard deflection: old survey monuments, not current boundary markers. But after the hikers left, Chen reviewed their photos. The 6 blue markers they'd photographed formed a line, a boundary segment running northeast to southwest through the Elwha Valley. According to Ortega's map, those markers were part of the blue boundary's eastern edge. The hikers had crossed from outside the blue boundary to inside it. Chen radioed his supervisor. "Do we have any reports of unusual incidents inside the blue boundary zone? Anything different from outside it?" The response was immediate and sharp. "Do not discuss the blue markers over radio. Do not reference internal boundaries. If you have questions, submit them through proper channels." Chen filed a written report asking the same question. The response came 2 weeks later. No evidence suggests any difference between areas inside and outside blue marker positions. Markers are historical remnants only, no further inquiry necessary. But Chen had started paying attention to incident reports. Over the next year, he tracked every search and rescue operation, every hiker injury, every unusual occurrence in Olympics backcountry. Then he overlaid them on Ortega's map, showing the blue boundary. The pattern was undeniable. Inside the blue boundary, 23 search and rescue operations, 47 reports of hiker disorientation, 12 equipment malfunctions, GPS failures, compass deviations, 8 reports of unusual atmospheric conditions, 3 disappearances, all hikers later found. Outside the blue boundary, 7 search and rescue operations, 11 reports of hiker disorientation, 2 equipment malfunctions, 0 reports of unusual conditions, 0 disappearances. The blue boundary enclosed roughly 25% of Olympics' total area, but it accounted for 76% of search and rescue operations and 100% of temporary disappearances. Chen submitted his analysis to Regional Command in September 2013 with a single question: is there a correlation between the blue boundary zone and increased incident rates? The response was unambiguous. Ranger Chen is instructed to cease investigation of blue markers immediately. Statistical analysis of incidents relative to geographical zones is outside the scope of ranger duties. This matter is closed. Further inquiry will result in disciplinary action. Chen stopped investigating, but he kept the data. The installation records. In 2015, researcher Dr. Patricia Langford was reviewing Historical Park Service archives when she found contract records for Olympic National Park from 1973. One entry caught her attention: Boundary Survey and Monument Installation. Internal Zone Demarcation, $847,000. The contract was awarded to Pacific Northwest Survey Associates, a firm that specialized in federal land surveys. The scope of work: install 127 boundary monuments within Olympic National Park interior to demarcate designated management zone per NPS directive. Langford requested the full contract documents. What she received was a single page showing the contract amount and date. Everything else, the survey maps, the zone designation, the NPS directive authorizing the work, was marked "Records Not Available." She contacted Pacific Northwest Survey Associates. The firm had gone out of business in 1998. Their records had been transferred to the National Archives, but when Langford requested the Olympic contract files, she was told, "Records related to Olympic National Park internal boundary survey are restricted. Access requires National Park Service authorization." She requested authorization. Request denied. Reason: survey records contain sensitive information related to park management, not available for public review. Langford shared her findings with Marcus Webb. The blue markers weren't unauthorized monuments installed by amateurs. They were part of an official Park Service contract in 1973. Someone at the NPS had authorized the installation of 127 boundary markers inside Olympic National Park to demarcate designated management zone. What zone? What was being managed? Webb submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for the 1973 contract documents and the NPS directive that authorized them. 4 months later, he received a response. Records related to 1973 Olympic National Park internal boundary survey are exempt from FOIA disclosure under 5 U.S.C. Section 552(b)(7)(e) Techniques and Procedures for Law Enforcement Investigations. The blue boundary was related to law enforcement. But what law was being enforced? What was the Park Service investigating inside that zone? Nobody would say. Why rangers won't explain. Marcus Webb has worked Olympic National Park for 19 years. He's hiked past blue markers hundreds of times. He's answered hiker questions about them with deflections and half-truths. He's watched search and rescue operations concentrate inside the blue boundary zone at rates that can't be coincidental. And he's been explicitly instructed not to explain any of it. People ask, "What are the blue markers for?" Webb says. I tell them they're old survey monuments, historical reference points. That's what I'm supposed to say? But Webb knows what the blue markers actually are. They're boundary monuments installed in 1973 as part of an $847,000 federal contract to demarcate an internal management zone within Olympic National Park. That zone has clearly defined boundaries. It encompasses 140 square miles of wilderness. It accounts for 76% of the park's search and rescue operations, despite representing only 25% of the park's area. And the Park Service refuses to explain what's being managed inside it. We're not allowed to discuss it because the moment we acknowledge the blue boundary exists, people will ask what it's separating, Webb explains. And we don't have an answer we're authorized to give. The official position is that the blue markers are historical remnants with no current significance. But historical remnants don't correlate with increased incident rates. They don't require $847,000 federal contracts. They don't get classified under law enforcement exemptions. Something is different inside the blue boundary, Webb says. The data proves it. Hikers get lost more often. Equipment malfunctions more frequently. Search times are longer. Recovery rates are different. But rangers can't acknowledge that. Can't investigate it. Can't warn hikers that crossing a blue boundary marker means entering a zone where the rules change. The forbidden questions. Since 2006, rangers have submitted 23 formal inquiries about the blue markers. All have been denied or deflected. The questions are always the same. What is the blue boundary defining? Why were the markers installed? What is different inside the blue zone? Who authorized the 1973 survey? Why are incident rates higher inside the boundary? The answers are always the same. Historical survey markers. No current significance. No further investigation necessary. In 2018, a ranger named Foster asked one more question. If the blue markers have no significance, why can't we remove them? He was told blue markers are to remain in place. Do not remove. Do not relocate. Do not discuss with unauthorized personnel. Foster pressed, if they're just historical remnants, why do they need to stay? 3 weeks later, Foster was reassigned to a different park. The message was clear. Don't ask about the blue markers. Don't investigate what they're marking. Don't question why they're there. Accept that 127 boundary monuments define a zone within the park. Accept that something is different inside that zone. Accept that you'll never know what. The boundary remains. Blue marker 47 still sits 3 miles inside Olympic's official boundary. Blue marker 82 still marks a boundary between 2 sections of wilderness that are both federally protected. Blue marker 103 still sits at the geographic center of the park, 7 miles from any legal boundary. All 127 blue markers remain in place, maintained by the Park Service, marking a boundary that officially doesn't exist. Rangers refuse to explain them because they can't. The explanation is classified. The 1973 contract documents are restricted. The internal management zone designation is exempt from public disclosure. Here's what haunts me, Webb says. The blue boundary has been there since 1973. 50 years, which means whatever it's separating, whatever is different inside that zone, has been there for 50 years. And in 50 years, not one ranger has been authorized to know what it is. Hikers cross blue markers every day. They see steel posts painted blue and assume they're historical markers, old survey points, decommissioned monuments. They don't know they're crossing from one management zone into another. They don't know the rules change on the other side. They don't know that 76% of Olympic search and rescue operations happen in the zone they just entered, because rangers are refused permission to tell them. The blue markers aren't there to keep people out, Webb says. There's no fence, no closure, no restriction. You can hike right past them. But once you cross them, you're inside a boundary the Park Service spent $847,000 to define and 50 years to keep secret. And were refused permission to explain what you just crossed into.